Since he's in such great spirits and doing well, is to encourage him to eat, to drink, to stay hydrated, to be up out of bed, and to be working and doing the things that he needs to do to get well. I'll refer Dr. Connolly to any questions.
Thanks, Brian.
And you're listening
important to note the President's
coverage of a briefing on President Trump's health at Walter Reed.
We remain cautiously optimistic, but he's doing great. With that, one other note. It should be clear that he's got plenty of work to get done from the Chief of Staff, and he's doing it. With that, if there's a couple questions about the President's health in the last couple days.
Sir, can you tell us the President's oxygen saturation level, please?
Yeah, so the last saturation that we had up walking around, he was about 96%.
And he's receiving no, he has not received any supplemental oxygen?
He's not on oxygen right now, that's right.
He has not received any at all?
He's not needed any this morning today at all. That's right.
Do you have an estimated date when he might be discharged?
Well, I don't want to put a hard date on that. He's doing so well, but with a known course of the illness, days 7 to 10, we get really concerned about the inflammatory phase 2. Given that we provided some of these advanced therapies so early in the course, a little bit earlier than most of the patients we know and follow, it's hard to tell where he is on that course. And so every day we're evaluating, does he need to be here? What does he need? And where's he going?
What do you see as the probability that he will need supplemental oxygen going forward?
I don't want to put a percentage on that, but right now all indicators are that that he'll remain off of oxygen going forward.
And in terms of like blood clots, pneumonia, bacterial infection, what do you see as the risk on that front?
Well, we know that all of them are risks associated with this condition. He is receiving all of the standard of care and beyond per routine, international COVID protocols. So we're monitoring for all of that, but at the moment, there's no cause for concern.
You said he's fever-free now. What was his fever when he had one, sir?
I'd rather not give any specific numbers, but he did have a fever Thursday into Friday, and since Friday morning, he's had none.
Okay. And what was the date? On top of the other antibodies.
I'm sorry?
Why remdesivir on top of the antibodies?
So remdesivir works a little bit differently than the antibodies. We're maximizing all aspects of his care, attacking this virus, multi-pronged approach. As the president, I didn't want to hold anything back. If there was any possibility that it would add value to his care and expedite his return, I wanted to take it. And the team agreed, and that's what we proceeded.
Doctor, what was the date of the president's last negative test?
I'm not going to get into all the testing going back, but he and all the staff routinely are tested, and so.
Doctor, what is the PPE protocol for President Trump receiving visitors and doctors?
It's the same as any hospital has. We have an area that's clean that you put your equipment on, and then beyond that, everybody is fully gowned up, masks, gloves. We're protecting ourselves and him.
Have you done a screen? Has there been any sign of any lung damage whatsoever?
We are following all of that. We do daily ultrasounds. We do daily lab work. The team is tracking all of that.
Has there been any sign of damage?
I'm not going to go into specifics of what the findings of any of that are.
Down on one thing. Has he ever been on supplemental oxygen?
Right now, he is not on oxygen.
I know you keep saying right now, but should we read into the fact that he had been previously?
Yesterday and today, he was not on oxygen.
So he has not been on it during his COVID treatment?
He's not on oxygen right now.
Has hydroxychloroquine been considered as a viable treatment option for the president?
We discussed it. He asked about it. He's not on it now.
And Doctor, what symptoms? Has he also experienced difficulty breathing?
No, he has not. Never did. He had a little cough. He had the fever. More than anything, he's felt run down.
Who is handling contact tracing? Is that the White House or CDC?
The White House Medical Unit, in conjunction with, in collaboration with CDC and local state health departments, are conducting all contact tracing per CDC guidelines.
When was the positive diagnosis made? You said 72 hours. That was that Wednesday.
Yeah. So Thursday afternoon, following following the news of a close contact is when we repeated testing. And given kind of clinical indications, I had a little bit more concern, and that's when late that night we got the PCR confirmation that he was.
Is there any clarity on how he became infected?
Not going to go into that. As far as his care, it's irrelevant.
Or when he became infected?
Yeah, we're not going to go into that. We're just tracking his clinical course and providing the best care we can.
Will President Trump have to stay at Walter Reed to get the 5-day regulatory treatment?
We've discussed that right now. If he needs all 5 days, that will likely be the course. But again, every day we're reviewing with the team his needs for being here. And as soon as he gets to the point where it's not a requirement, he may still need some care, but if we can provide that downtown at the house, then we will transition at that point, as long as it's safe and appropriate. The team agrees.
In addition to his weight, does he have any other risk factors that make him more at risk for sort of a severe case?
Well, not particularly. I mean, he's 74. He's male, and he is slightly overweight. Other than that, he's very healthy. His cholesterol is great. His blood pressure is great. It's not on medication for that. He's up and active. And you saw his activity the days leading up to the long hours and everything else. He's able to handle it.
Can you provide other vitals like heart rate, blood pressure, and temperature?
So his heart rate is in the 70s to 80s. His blood pressure has remained where it's historically been during our physicals. 110 to 120 is a stop. He's great. It's never budged. Had no concerns there.
So why was the decision made to transfer him here?
Because he's the president of the United States.
And obviously, if doctors have found that the prone position is helpful for COVID, has he been in that at all?
No, he asked about that. He did. Thursday into Friday. He's been briefed by the task force and all the scientists for months, and he brought that up, as we were discussing his cough. And at that time, his oxygen levels were okay, and we didn't feel like we needed to do it. We came up here and discussed it with the team as well. We consider all options, but he has not needed any of that.
Why wasn't the First Lady admitted as well?
The First Lady's doing great. Thanks for asking. She has no indication for hospitalization, advanced therapy. She's convalescing at home. Thank you.
I'm going to try to pin you down one more time. I know you said there's no oxygen.
He's not on oxygen
But did he receive
today.
Did he receive any on Thursday?
And what's today?
Saturday.
No, Thursday.
No Thursday, no Friday, no Saturday. That's fine.
So
that was why we were confused.
Thursday, no oxygen, none at this moment. Yeah, and yesterday with the team, while we were all here, he was not on oxygen.
So has the president actually been admitted as a patient to this hospital?
The president is a patient at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center.
Is he on any steroids?
See?
Press, thank
Can you
you.
ask that
Thank you very
last
much.
question? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
That's Doctor and Naval Commander Sean Connolly, the White House physician, concluding a briefing with reporters outside of Walter Reed Military Medical Facility in Washington, D.C. Dr. Connolly described himself as extremely happy with President Trump's condition. He said the president is doing very well. He added a number of times the president is not on supplemental oxygen. There might have been some confusion as to if he ever had been on that oxygen. We'll talk about that with Joe Palca. Dr. Connolly quoted President Trump as saying, "I feel like I could walk out of here today." He noted that the president had a 96% oxygen saturation level, but also said that day 7 to 10 can be the hardest. Also said the president has had no fever since yesterday morning. Let's bring in NPR's Joe Palca and NPR's Tamara Keith, who've been monitoring this appearance too. Thanks very much for being with us. Joe, what did you notice?
I noticed that the Dr. Connolly was very strange about not wanting to say he never received oxygen. He didn't receive it Thursday, he didn't receive it Friday, he didn't receive it Saturday, but he wouldn't, for some reason, say he didn't receive. Kept saying he's not on oxygen now.
I think he left a window for Friday morning. It was definitely, he was talking like a politician, not a doctor at that moment.
Right. But the other thing that I'm just looking at my notes and trying to figure out the timing, he said that the president showed symptoms on Thursday afternoon, which made him, the Dr. Conley, concerned enough to have him retested, and it was late on Thursday, early Friday, that he had a positive test on this PCR. It's called the polymerase chain reaction test. But Dr. Conley also said that he started on antibody therapy 48 hours ago. So I'm counting backwards, Friday morning, Thursday morning. So I'm a little confused about whether the president got antibody therapy on Thursday well before he was testing positive. That's just one. Maybe I may have noted the date down wrong, but that was confusing. Otherwise, Dr. Conley was very keen to say the president's feeling well. He didn't. He said that the president's chief complaint was fatigue. He said today the president, as Scott, you said, was prepared to walk out of here, but it's interesting. He didn't say the fatigue has gone away. Again, he wouldn't say, I'm going to send him home tomorrow, which he clearly isn't going to do, and he didn't want to be pinned down on any of the potential outcomes. But he did once again say that this is a critical time period. Many patients seem fine at the start of this window, and during the window or later, their conditions crash. So we're in the gray zone, I guess, is where we're at. But at least at the moment, the president seems to be doing well.
Tamara, Keith, what did you note?
Yeah, so a couple things stand out to me. One is that he's saying that the president got earlier treatment both with the experimental monoclonal antibody and remdesivir. He got it sooner than is traditionally called for in the treatment plans or the standard of care. And he said, I'm treating the President of the United States. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to try everything I can. Interestingly, he did say that the President is not currently on hydroxychloroquine, which is a drug that the President had been pushing really hard early on in the pandemic.
He said he asked about it, though.
Yes, but he said he asked about it. He said the president asked about being put in a prone position. He said the president is sort of up on various treatments. The other thing that stands out is just you have the president's physician coming out and being willing to give very specific information about certain medical things. The president's blood pressure, his current oxygen saturation level when he was up and walking around. But he was evasive about other things. It seemed pretty clear from what he was saying that it is quite likely that the president did receive supportive oxygen on Friday morning at the White House. Just the way he used his language, being a bit evasive there. And also, he was evasive in talking about the president's testing. And part of that may be that on Tuesday, President Trump attended a presidential debate where everyone was supposed to be tested. And it is not clear whether the president was tested that day. We just don't know because the White House handled the testing for the president and his entourage.
Or did not handle the testing.
And we don't know. But I will just say that Dr. Connolly would not get into details about the testing. He also would not say whether any lung damage was shown. He did say that they are doing ultrasounds and other tests every day to see how the president is doing. But there were just some pieces of information that he wouldn't share and others that he would.
And there was an interesting omission, too. I didn't hear anything, maybe I missed this, about an X-ray, because an X-ray is one of the typical things that's done to look for signs of lung damage from this disease. So, there were things...
Let me just add one other thing. When the White House said that the president was going to Walter Reed, they said he was just going up there to work from the presidential suite at this hospital. The doctor today did make it clear that President Trump is a patient at Walter Reed Medical Center.
Yes, he said that quite specifically. Joe, people asked specifically about the oxygen level. It seemed right on the nose, didn't it?
Yeah. I wanted to comment, though, on something that Tam brought up about, what the doctor said. And this is this tension, which I find, very difficult for physicians and scientists to negotiate. But the doctor wants to give his patient something. The problem is that the something may not be proven to work. And it's always tempting to do something rather than nothing. But the trouble is you never know for sure whether doing nothing might be as good or better if you're in a situation where the drug hasn't been thoroughly investigated. So it's a conundrum. It's a conundrum.
NPR's Joe Palca, science correspondent, Tamara Keith, White House.
Hi, this is Lakshmi Singh from NPR, and you're listening to KSKA Anchorage, Alaska Public Media, FM 91.1, connecting Alaskans, life informed.
You know that little recycling symbol on the back of plastic containers?
This stamp made people believe something that wasn't true, that all this plastic trash could be turned into something else.
On the next Planet Money, how most Americans came to believe the lie that plastic can be recycled. And on How I Built This, two brothers used the pandemic to reimagine their apparel company. That's on the next Planet Money and How I Built This.
Saturday at 2, repeating Wednesday at 2 on FM 91.1. Support for Alaska Public Media comes from sustaining members and from Wastman and Associates, providing system analysis, software engineering, and project management in Alaska for over 30 years. Wastman.com.
Northern Air Cargo, providing freight transportation to 10 rural Alaska communities. NAC offers a variety of service options to get the freight where it needs to be. Northern Air Cargo, serving Alaska since 1956.
From NPR News in Washington, D.C., this is Weekend Edition. I'm Scott Simon. President Trump's physician, Dr. Sean Connolly, updated the American public on his health status this morning.
At this time, the team and I are extremely happy with the progress the president has made. Thursday, he had a mild cough and some nasal congestion and fatigue, all of which are now resolving and improving.
This hour, what the president's diagnosis might mean for the campaign and the country. Also, Sir David Attenborough with a tough diagnosis for our planet. A film about three of the first British secret agents in World War II, and they were women. And Idols, the punk powerhouse band from Bristol, England. First, we have our newscast. It's Saturday, October 3rd, 2020.
Live from NPR News, I'm Barbara Klein. President Trump is doing very well, according to doctors at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Dr. Sean Dooley there says Trump is being treated for symptoms of the coronavirus.
We have monitored his cardiac function, his kidney function, his liver function. All of those are normal. And the president this morning is not on oxygen, not having difficulty breathing or walking around the White House medical unit upstairs.
Officials are declining to say whether the president has been on oxygen since his diagnosis Thursday. They say they're continuing a treatment regimen that includes antibodies and at least a 5-day course of remdesivir. They say at 7 to 10 days after diagnosis, they'll be monitoring. It's a critical time. The CDC and National Institutes of Health is developing a distribution system for vaccines once they're available. And as NPR's Ping Huang reports, they've tasked a group of experts to come up with recommendations to overcome socioeconomic and healthcare inequities.
Black, Latino, and Native populations have been hard hit by COVID-19. So Dr. William Fagey, co-chair of the committee from the National Academy of Sciences, says this panel of experts considered the factors that put these groups at higher risk.
On the social vulnerability, they turn out to be things like overcrowding living conditions, multiple generations in one home, people going to work because they have to. They can't work from home.
A new report details the group's recommendations with respect to vaccine distribution. It says the vaccine should be free to get, even for those without insurance, and offered first to the people at highest risk of catching and dying from the disease. Ping Huang, NPR News.
The Labor Department says hiring slowed in September, with employers adding 661,000 jobs. That's less than half the number of jobs added in August. NPR's Andrea Hsu reports the government also finds 4 times more women than men dropped out of the workforce last month.
865,000 women either stopped working or stopped looking for work as summer turned to fall this year. That's compared to only 216,000 men. Here's University of Michigan economist Betsy Stevenson.
There's no way to look at that number and conclude anything other than the fact that the child care crisis is wreaking havoc on women's employment.
Women in the U.S. take on the bulk of childcare and housework in families. Now, many are also managing their children's virtual schooling. As recently as February, women made up more than half the U.S. workforce. The pandemic has erased those gains. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
This is NPR. Crews are battling a wildfire in California's wine country that's only 10% contained. Since breaking out earlier this week, the glass fire has already burned nearly 100 square miles in Napa and Sonoma counties. Italy's far-right former interior minister is in a Sicilian court today, facing charges of kidnapping more than 100 migrants last year. As NPR's Sylvia Poggioli reports, the leader of the Anti-Migrant League Party claims he did it to defend Italy.
The alleged kidnapping occurred in July last year. Matteo Salvini ordered a group of rescued undocumented migrants remain on board an overcrowded vessel for 6 days, despite a scabies outbreak and a suspected case of TB. One of Salvini's first moves when he took office in 2018 was to declare Italian ports closed to ships rescuing migrants fleeing Libya by boat. While in office, Salvini and his anti-migrant League Party soared in the polls. But after a year in opposition, his popularity has dropped. Salvini is now trying to leverage the trial for political gain. Last week, he said, "I will plead guilty to defending Italy and the Italians." Sylvia Poggioli, NPR News, Rome.
A Northrop Grumman cargo ship is heading to the International Space Station after launching last night from Virginia's Wallops Island. It's carrying some Thanksgiving treats as well as a new $23 million titanium toilet. I'm Barbara Klein, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, which aims to improve the quality of people's lives through grants supporting child well-being, the environment, medical research, and the performing arts, and the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
Does your child need help with their homework? Live Homework Help provides free on-demand tutoring, test preparation, and writing assistance for students in grades K through 12 and first year of college. Get help, take practice quizzes, and use the Skills Center Resource Library. Log in and get help at SLED, that's sled.alaska.edu. This message sponsored by the Alaska Library Network.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. We have just concluded bringing you a briefing from White House physician and Naval Commander Dr. Sean Conley from the Walter Reed Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, where the president was hospitalized after he tested positive for the coronavirus. There were, of course, reports yesterday that he had experienced mild symptoms, cough, congestion, fever, and fatigue. We're joined now by two stalwarts, NPR White House correspondent Tamara Keith. Tam, thanks for being back with us.
Glad to be with you.
And NPR science correspondent Joe Palca. Joe, thank you very much.
Glad to be here.
And Joe, let's get to the medical aspect first. President's vital signs sounded good, didn't they?
Yes, his vital signs seem good. His oxygen saturation, that's how much oxygen is getting into his body through his lungs, was appropriate. his heart rate was fairly close to normal, 70 to 80. And his doctor said that he was well pleased with the results. I mean, the problem or the question that still comes up about this is what the things that we didn't hear. The president the doctor was asked multiple times, has the president ever been on oxygen, supplemental oxygen? And the Dr. Conley refused to say no. He said he's not on now, and he wasn't on this time. It was like there was a window when he might have been on. And he's taking this remdesivir, which is a drug that's usually reserved for more seriously ill patients, but maybe not. And he refused to say anything about the prognosis, except to say that they're in a period now where they'll be monitoring very closely because this time in patients' illness can be very potentially very dangerous, because this is a time when suddenly a bunch of what they call a cascade of symptoms or cascade of events take place that can make the patient's health status decline precipitously.
Tamara Keith, you noticed that Dr. Conley, as the White House physician, had some good political skills when the question about supplemental oxygen was raised.
Indeed. He kept emphasizing he is not on oxygen now. And I don't spend a lot of time talking to doctors, but I do spend a lot of time talking to politicians. And that was politician language if I've ever seen it. He was very precise, and the issue, though, was, the question was, has the president ever been on supplemental oxygen in the course of his treatment for coronavirus? And the doctor said, well, he's not on oxygen now. And then reporters kept trying and trying. They're like, okay, was he on oxygen Thursday? The doctor says no. Was he on oxygen Friday? He was not on oxygen here at Walter Reed. Well, as we all know, President Trump spent the better part of the day at the White House on Friday. And the good doctor did not weigh in, would not say whether the president had been on supplemental oxygen Friday morning or during the day. He says he's not on it now and that his oxygen levels are good. This is a situation where transparency and clarity are very important for the American public and for the world, in fact, who's watching President Trump and how he is doing. And there was a fair bit of evasiveness. In fact, this press conference left a lot of questions. He said the president was diagnosed 72 hours ago. That would put it at Wednesday, not Thursday, when they announced that the president was positive.
Yeah, and I guess we should note, Tam, that the president is just one member of the White House staff, if you please, who has been diagnosed as being positive for the coronavirus, isn't he?
Yeah, in fact, a large number of people directly associated with the president have now tested positive, including most of the people involved with his debate preparations, including Kellyanne Conway, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, just in the last hour has tweeted that he is positive for coronavirus. The president's campaign manager has tested positive for coronavirus.
I'm sorry, I hadn't heard that. Chris Christie has tested positive too?
Chris Christie tweeted that he has tested positive. And I will just add that I've just gotten a note in that a source familiar with the president's health told White House reporters, quote, "The president's vitals over the last 24 hours were very concerning, and the next 48 hours will be critical in terms of his care. We're still on a clear path to full recovery," which is different. That is a much different tone than was just delivered on television.
Yeah. What do you make of that, Joe?
Well, I wish, maybe if I'd gotten into medical school, I'd be better off now answering your questions. But the other thing, I mean, it's very interesting what didn't come out. I mean, the president talked about his systolic blood pressure, didn't talk about his diastolic pressure. I don't know why not. Maybe there was no reason to, but why not? It's usually, you get two numbers when you talk about blood pressure, and the doctor only gave one. You do not send someone to a hospital if they don't need to go. I mean, that's the case.
What they said is he's the president of the United States. And the other thing is the way the president gets to the hospital, there are always reporters watching when he goes to Walter Reed. When he goes to Marine One, there are always cameras. And he was able to walk on his own 2 feet, give a thumbs up and a wave. He was in a condition to be able to do that yesterday.
And it should be noted too, in Walter Reed, I mean, it's not like he's sharing a room with 4 other patients.
They have a suite for the president.
Yeah. Yes, Joe. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, even so, the president's clinic at the White House is no doubt capable of maintaining a patient in most anything less than a hospital required setting. So this idea that that there's things in a hospital that are necessary, they must have had some concern that he would need the more extended types of equipment that a hospital can provide. Whether he's actually in the hospital, that was the issue that came up of whether he'd been admitted or not. But clearly today, his doctor said yes, he's a patient at this hospital. So is it, if he hadn't been a president of the United States, would he have been admitted to the hospital? Well, we didn't get the answer to that question. Presumably, it's possible he would not have. We just don't know.
Yeah, and Tam, to strike a political observation here, going to Walter Reed has raised this to a whole new level of concern for the American people too, hasn't it?
Yeah, certainly. This raises the stakes. It's not, the president's not just like the rest of us at home nursing a cold. The president is receiving the state-of-the-art therapeutics that are often given to patients that are in dire conditions. The White House doctor is saying they gave it to the president early in hopes of maybe helping earlier than is normally called for. But you have a situation where the president of the United States is in the hospital with a disease that has affected millions of Americans and has killed 200,000. We don't know how the president will do. He could do just fine, but we're getting very mixed signals from the White House right now.
NPR's Tamara Keith and Joe Palca joining us this morning. Thanks very much for being with us both.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
A lot of Americans may wonder this morning, how could the president of all people come down with the coronavirus? The president of the United States is often called the most powerful person in the world. They can cause armies to march and rockets to soar. They can also hear directly from some of the finest scientific and medical minds in the world. Presidents are surrounded by rings of highly trained security guards who protect them at all times. The Queen of England, the Pope, and maybe Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi Jinping may be the only other people on Earth who can be so exquisitely and completely protected. How does the President of the United States wind up in a hospital being treated for coronavirus? This most powerful person may have been well informed by experts, but he publicly disdained much of what they told him. Now, just 9 months ago, as much of the world was beginning to learn about a new and unprecedented virus, but this very week, during the presidential debates, where he derided his opponent for wearing what he called the biggest mask I've seen, even as scientists consistently say masks and social distancing can help stop the virus spread. According to reports, the president's family and many of his supporters waved away doctors from the Cleveland Clinic who tried to remind those in the president's party in their debate hall to wear masks. Most of the president's entourage did not. And today the president they came to support is fighting the coronavirus, as are several of those people who came to cheer him. There is so much suffering in America now. More than 200,000 people have died in this pandemic. Tens of millions of people are out of work. And lines of people waiting for food stretch across this famously abundant country. Millions struggle just to keep going, and the list of aides and admirers who've been close to the president recently and tested positive grows almost hourly. Maybe President Trump's diagnosis, and that of so many around him, can remind Americans in a way his denial has not, that the coronavirus is real. It won't just disappear. We have reported on the lives of so many people who died in this pandemic, and each time you grieve for a good life lost in the hole they leave in so many hearts. the president will get the best care possible. The American people deserve the same. You're listening to NPR News.
This is KSKA Anchorage, Alaska Public Media, FM 91.1, connecting Alaskans, life informed. Support for Alaska Public Media comes from Tidal Wave Books, encouraging children and young adults to enjoy the world of reading, including this year's Battle of the Book selections. More at wavebooks.com and on Facebook.
Across this country, news organizations have been trimming staff or closing up, but listeners like you keep public radio strong. I'm Steve Inskeep. When you step up to give now, you keep reporters in your region on the story. Public radio gives you serious, sustained examinations of our world. Help the journalism that you rely on stay strong. All you have to do is give.
Join the team to keep Alaska Public Media strong at alaskapublic.org or call 550-8484.
I'm Barbara Klein with these headlines. Doctors at the Walter Reed Military Medical Center say President Trump is doing very well. They say he's being given remdesivir, a drug usually reserved for hospitalized COVID-19 patients, and is also receiving an experimental antibody therapy. India is confirming 100,000 coronavirus deaths, putting its death toll behind the U.S. and Brazil. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is being sharply criticized for his handling of the outbreak. Zimbabwe is postponing elections scheduled for December, citing the coronavirus pandemic, even as the numbers of new cases and deaths in the country fall. The main opposition party calls it an unconstitutional political maneuver. I'm Barbara Klein, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from X-Chair, maker of the X2 home office chair with dynamic variable lumbar support and 10 ergonomic adjustments. Donating to Gladstone Research Institute to fight COVID-19 at xchair.com. From American Jewish World Service, supporting human rights advocates worldwide as they respond to COVID-19 and defend democracies. Learn more at ajws.org. And from the Annie E. Casey Foundation.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Americans are reacting to the news of President Trump and Melania Trump's illness with a mixture of concern and anger. Concern because they worry about President Trump and Mrs. Trump's well-being and the well-being of the country. Anger because many people believe that Mr. Trump acted carelessly before contracting coronavirus. NPR's Brian Mann spoke with some people yesterday as news of the president's condition was just emerging.
Don Vroman is wearing her mask, waiting her turn to go inside a shop in Troy, New York that's requiring strict social distancing. It's the rule in this part of the country. Vroman, who's retired, says she's scared for her president.
I'm praying it's mild, and I'm sending him all my prayers for him and his wife. I hope they both fight this and recuperate and hope he wins the next election.
Around the country, a lot of Americans are offering praise and prayers for a president they love. Tony Garcia is a retired veteran in Texas.
I'm going to be loyal to whoever the commander-in-chief is, and I feel sorry that he came down with it. He travels all over the country, and he meets a lot of people, and I just wish him and his wife a very speedy recovery.
But others we spoke with are far more critical of the president, who mocked Democratic challenger Joe Biden this week during their debate for Biden's diligence wearing a mask in public. Jessica Dewey is a PhD student in Kansas City.
I was expecting probably at some point for him to get COVID. Him and everybody, I feel like, on his
campaign don't really use masks or don't social distance, so then those increase the likelihood of getting sick.
Opinion polls show Americans are widely critical of Trump's handling of the pandemic, which has killed more than 200,000 people in this country. Some voters tell NPR they actually see a kind of rough justice in the president's illness. Among them, Josephine Floyd, a retiree who lives in Philadelphia.
I'm very happy that he got it because he didn't use wisdom. You know you're supposed to use a mask, so he put himself at risk. And he also put other people at risk because he didn't use wisdom. He didn't listen to the scientists.
Beyond Trump's handling of the coronavirus, people voice grave concern over what his illness might mean for the country if the commander-in-chief is distracted or sidelined altogether. Sherry Johnson is in Seattle, Washington.
It's very scary because he's now put our country at risk with, potential threats that, maybe were perceived as weak at the moment, and we just hope and pray that no one takes full advantage of that.
It's now just over 30 days to the election, and in much of the country, people are already voting. We've heard a lot of uncertainty over what President Trump's illness might mean for the outcome.
October surprise right on time,
Daniel Robinson is a farmer who lives in Kansas City.
I'm just skeptical to see what's going to happen on the other side, how it's going to affect the election, the campaign leading up to the election.
This election was already fraught. Karen Nicolini, who works in real estate in Philadelphia, worries Trump might try to use his diagnosis to gain advantage.
To be honest, I really feel that he might be trying to say that he has it and then come up with some cure between now and election to make it seem like it's a miracle and encourage more people to vote for him, like he has the solution, like he's had the solution all along.
But Trump supporter Gary Crawford, who's 81 and lives in Virginia Beach, Virginia, says he hopes the president will bounce back in time to win in November.
I hope he's okay because we actually need a strong person in that office, the Oval Office. It'll definitely slow the campaign down on the Republican side.
One reaction NPR heard a lot was the hope President Trump's diagnosis might serve as a wake-up call, causing him and his supporters to be more diligent about mask wearing and other social distancing rules that slow the coronavirus spread. Brian Mann, NPR News.
The Kentucky Attorney General has released audio recordings of the deliberations of a grand jury in Louisville that declined to indict police officers in the killing of Breonna Taylor. Now that they've been made public, there's plenty of debate over whether grand jurors were given all the information to decide whether police officers who shot and killed her should have been charged in her death. Amina Elahi of member station WFPL has been covering the story and joins us now. Amina, thanks so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
Tell us what you can about these tapes. What do they sound like, and what do you hear in them?
Well, they don't sound too great. There's a mix of sort of live testimony as well as recorded interviews, so what you're hearing feels a little distant at times, but you get a sense of the procedure and the people who are speaking, and the live testimony seems to mainly come from investigators and prosecutors from the Attorney General's office. But some of the most interesting parts are the interviews of officers that were part of the police's internal investigation, and for some of them it was the first time we were hearing what they had to say. I want you to listen to a little bit of what Detective Miles Cosgrove is talking about, what he remembers of that night. But again, the recordings aren't the greatest, so I hope you can get a sense of what the grand jurors heard.
I'm almost positive that I fired during those flashes and during that vivid white and black gray colors I was seeing.
The FBI ballistics analysis determined that Cosgrove was the one who fired the fatal shot, but the state police analysis was inconclusive on that matter.
And of course, at the heart of so much of the controversy is that was a no-knock warrant that police had. Why a no-knock warrant? What did the recordings reveal about this?
Well, the no-knock warrant was issued in conjunction with several other no-knock warrants that night. The police say that they had changed the plan to do sort of a knock and announce because they believed that Breonna Taylor would be unarmed and potentially alone. But both the police and Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, agree that they had knocked on the door. Kenneth Walker says he heard them knocking, but he couldn't hear them identifying themselves as police. So when they came in, he fired a shot shot at them. Now, the Attorney General has said that 2 of the officers were justified in shooting Breonna Taylor because they did so sort of in self-defense in response to Walker's gunshot. And the Attorney General also said that his investigation found the officers announced who they were because they found a witness to corroborate. But what we find in the recordings is that the witness who corroborated changed his story, first saying he didn't hear police announce and later saying he did. And the grand jurors heard that at least 3 other witnesses said they didn't hear the police announce. So there's still a lot of questions about what exactly happened that night.
And of course, the grand jury indicted former Detective Brett Hankinson for wanton endangerment. When he fired his gun, bullets went into the apartment of a neighbor. What did you learn about him from these tapes?
Well, Hankinson made a lot of claims in his interview with police investigators that weren't backed up by evidence. For example, he claimed someone inside the apartment was shooting with a rifle. No such weapon was found on the premises. And he also said some things about being able to see a target inside when he couldn't actually see because the window he was shooting through was covered by blinds. So, again, raising a lot of questions that weren't actually able to be answered by these recordings.
Amina Elahi of member station WFPL in Louisville. Amina, thanks so much for covering the case and speaking with us.
You're welcome.
Sir David Attenborough is 94 years old and has some startling sentences in the first few pages of his new book. The natural world is fading, he writes. I've seen it with my own eyes. It will lead to our destruction. His book, A Life on Our Planet, My Witness Statement and Vision for the Future. And the highly honored broadcaster, historian of nature, and best-selling author joins us now. Sir David, thanks so much for being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
You were a BBC executive in the control room when the first pictures of Earth were sent back by the Apollo 8 crew. How did that change our view of the world?
Well, I think it changed everybody's view. I think that the sudden sight that there were 2 people away out there, high up in the sky, looking at the Earth from a distance where the whole globe was within one picture, was an extraordinary realization, not only of the smallness of the planet, but its isolation. And there we are on it, and everybody in the entire world was in that picture, except for the people in the spacecraft. I wasn't prepared for it, and I don't think anybody had actually said that they were prepared for it either. But somehow it really changed the attitude of people. Looking, suddenly we realized, we're there together and we're alone.
I feel the need to take up some of the very practical points that you raise in this book. You write, for example, we have become too skilled at fishing.
Yes.
What does that mean? What has that done?
That means that nothing is safe. If we want to, we can kill almost anything in the sea that we wish. And if there's a profit in it, we do that. Worse than that, even when there's not a profit in it, when governments actually see fit to subsidize it, so there's not a profit in it, we still go killing it, and they throw a heck of a lot of it back. And that's because of the oceanic commons, as they say, the areas of the ocean in which anybody can do what they like. There is no international law at the moment to stop. And then we will suddenly discover that suddenly the seas are almost empty. And we're on the danger of doing that. And we've exterminated great fisheries, the cod fishery. I mean, we've exterminated that from the Atlantic. The herrings have disappeared from the North Sea, and we don't learn the lessons.
You advocate what you call no-fish zones.
Yes, I advocate that there should be zones and parts of the ocean where they should be absolutely sacrosanct, where in fact populations of fish can build up and actually from that colonize the rest of the seas that we've stripped. If there is no corner of the oceans which is safe from fishing vessels of one kind or another, we are heading for total elimination of the edible fish from the sea.
You project what the world might look like in 10 years and even a century. Let me just ask you about the 2030s. You say 75% of the Amazon rainforest could be gone.
Oh, well, it could be gone, and the government of Brazil is saying that that's what they actually want to happen, because knocking down the rainforest is a very way to get a quick buck. You knock down a rainforest tree and you get a lot of money from the timber which you sell. Then you deal with the land, you put crops on the land and get another reward, and then you clear that furthermore for cattle. So it's very profitable in the short term. But that rainforest is one of the key elements in the whole of the weather patterns of the world. And if you knock down the whole of the Amazon rainforest, the whole of the climatic systems of rainfall and other climatic factors will go off balance. And who knows what effect that will have on the world.
Forgive me, but I feel the need to quote a movie in which your brother starred, Jurassic Park, where the scientist says, nature finds a way. You say in this book, with us or without us,
yep,
the wild will return.
Oh, yes, that is quite true. I'm quite sure it will survive. The natural world will survive, but whether it will survive in the form that will include us in it is another question.
You're 94, but I have to ask, for all you have seen almost a century, in times that have been bleak, where does this moment rank?
Well, I'm not sure you can take an overall view like that. If you have a global view, and science can give us, science would say that there are more species in danger of total disappearance than there have been in human history.
So what gives you hope? Or is that question not called for under the circumstances?
I don't think it is a responsible thing to do is to simply say that when we see the future, it's very dangerous and to hell with it. Mm-hmm. We have to do our best, and I believe we can do our best. The various meetings that have been convened by the United Nations setting out plans which need validation by national governments and which will cost national governments. And I think that we need to persuade our own government in this country, and maybe you in your country, that we as citizens recognize what's happening to the world, and we understand that it's going to cost something to put it right, and that the Western and developed countries who have had more than their fair share have may have got time to actually to pay more to sort things out.
Sir David Attenborough, his book, along with his co-author Johnny Hughes, is A Life on Our Planet. Thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
You're listening to Weekend Edition from NPR News. Professional sports, including football, baseball, basketball, have all been trying to figure out how to play during the pandemic, some with more success than others. College sports have also been trying to figure out how to compete or whether to compete. That includes college rodeo. As Becca Costello of NET Nebraska reports, about 3,500 student athletes who are used to chutes, ropes, and the backs of bucking broncos are facing uncertainty too.
For athletes like college freshman Gage McBride, rodeo tends to be a lifelong passion.
In my opinion, it's probably the greatest sport on earth.
McBride grew up in central Nebraska, competing in rodeos all over the state. His events are bull riding, bronc riding, and bareback riding. Basically, trying to stay on the back of an animal doing its very best to throw you to the ground. He says every rodeo feels like an adventure.
Just the adrenaline rush from the horses and everything going on. Fans in the stands.
But he hasn't experienced that full rodeo atmosphere in a while. His last year of high school rodeo was mostly canceled in the spring, and the events over the summer have been pretty different.
They got this huge grandstands and all that, and like it just with nobody in it, it doesn't feel the same. It's real quiet. They still play music and stuff, but I mean, it's just you and the other riders there.
McBride is hoping for a few more fans when he competes in college this fall. He ended up heading south to Panola College in Carthage, Texas. A quiet arena isn't just eerie. It's a financial challenge, too. Garrett Noakes coaches rodeo for Mid-Plains Community College in North Platte, Nebraska. He's really grateful to the colleges willing to risk hosting a rodeo this fall.
A rodeo with no spectators is awful hard to put on. I mean, it's less appealing to sponsors to sponsor a rodeo that doesn't have spectators. So you lose sponsor money, and then on the other end of it, you lose that money that the spectators would pay to come.
Rodeo isn't cheap, and this year's revenue, if there is any, will fund next year's scholarships. 4 of the 11 regions in the National Intercollegiate Rodeo Association canceled their fall events altogether, hoping to make up those rodeos in the second half of the season in the spring. Director of Public Relations Sarah Neely says the other 7 regions in the country are forging ahead.
Some are operating without fans completely. Some are 50% capacity. Some are parents and contestants only.
The NIRA has just 3 total staff members coordinating all those safety precautions.
To think that we're able to sanction any rodeos and have memberships coming through the door, it's just been miraculous, and hopefully spring will come through too, and we'll be able to limp along, and in the next few years we'll rebuild.
For some programs, it's already too late.
We had 4 rodeos in the spring, and all of them got canceled.
Larissa Wilson, who's training her horse at a local arena, has a rodeo scholarship at Northeast Community College in Norfolk, Nebraska. She competed in barrel racing in the program's first ever season last year, which got cut short by the virus. The pandemic hit the college budget pretty hard. Earlier this summer, they decided to cut the rodeo program entirely.
I was shocked. I felt like I didn't know what to do. My mind was all over the place, like, do I hurry up and transfer?
Wilson is staying at Northeast this semester because she already paid for tuition, but rodeo is too important to her to give up on it. Soon she'll transfer to Eastern Wyoming College so she can keep competing. She says she'll miss her old team.
They were family. It's kind of hard, but once I go to a different school, it'll be a new family.
For NPR News, I'm Becca Costello in Lincoln, Nebraska.
This is NPR News.
This is KSKA Anchorage, Alaska Public Media, FM 91.1, connecting Alaskans, life informed. Support for Alaska Public Media comes from members like you and from Lezour and Lezour, who remind parents this uncertain time is an opportunity to teach their children how to find resilience in face of potential danger by remaining calm and protecting the common good of others.
Sound Contracting Custom Builders, unitizing cold climate and green construction building technologies. Learn more at soundcontractingllc.com.
Turkey Red downtown Palmer open Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and offers 2 electric car charging stations. More at turkeyredak.com.
I'm Barbara Klein with these headlines. As President Trump gets treated for symptoms of the coronavirus, new cases are arising among his top advisors and allies on Capitol Hill. His campaign manager, Bill Stepien, former counselor Kellyanne Conway, and Republican Senators Tom Tillis and Mike Lee have all tested positive. Crews are battling a wildfire in California's wine country that's only 10% contained. Nearly 6,000 square miles of California terrain has burned in the state's worst fire season on record. In the NBA Finals, the LA Lakers lead the Miami Heat 2-0 after a win last night. Game 3 is tomorrow night. I'm Barbara Klein, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from Noom, providing an online evaluation and the tools to help people lead healthier lives through behavior change. More information at Noom, NOOM.com. From C3. C3.ai software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai. And from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon, a film star and frontman for a punk group. Coming up, but first, the latest on President Trump's medical condition. About an hour ago, the White House physician gave an update outside of the Walter Reed Medical Center, where Mr. Trump is being monitored since testing positive for the coronavirus. Dr. Sean Connolly said the president was doing, quote, very well, and that the symptoms he had, which included mild cough, congestion, and fatigue, seemed to be improving. He also said President Trump had never had difficulty breathing, and that the team treating him would review each day whether he needs to remain at Walter Reed. A source familiar with the president's health told reporters, quote, the next 48 hours will be critical in terms of his care. We're still not on a clear path to full recovery. Contact tracing is being done by the White House Medical Unit, and just today, former Governor Chris Christie announced on Twitter that he has tested positive for the coronavirus. That puts him among a number of people who've had varying degrees of contact with the president, including his former advisor Kellyanne Conway, close aide Hope Hicks, campaign manager Bill Stepien, and Republican Senators Mike Lee and Tom Tillis. 3 White House journalists have also gotten positive tests for the coronavirus, but so far, Vice President Mike Pence and Karen Pence have tested negative. The coronavirus continues to baffle when it comes to who gets sick, how sick they get, how many people that they in turn might infect. Zeynep Tufekci, a professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, thinks we might need to focus on how the virus tends to spread in clusters. Tomorrow on Weekend Edition with Lulu, she talks about what that could mean for controlling the pandemic. You can tune in for that conversation by asking your smart speaker to play NPR or your member station by name. A Call to Spy tells the story of 3 of the first agents to risk their lives as spies for Britain in occupied France during the first days of World War II. They are 3 women. Vera Atkins, a Jewish refugee who would become a famed spy master. Virginia Hall, an American who walks on a wooden leg. And Noor Inayat Khan, the daughter of a prominent Indian Muslim family who tells the British officer who recruits her,
because I'm a British citizen and I grew up in France, it's my home. I cannot just stand by and let the Nazis do what they're doing.
Is that all, Noor?
Actually, I also wish that an Indian would win high military distinction in this war. Because, if a few of us could do something brave in the Allied service, it might bridge the gap between the Indians and the British.
That's Radhika Apte as Noor Khan. Film's now playing in select theaters across the country and several streaming platforms. And Radhika Apte, well-known Indian film and stage actress, joins us now from Great Britain. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I gather, this is a famous story. I can't believe it hasn't hit the screen before. British intelligence had to be convinced to use women, and then they wound up thinking, well, what a brilliant stroke. They're less conspicuous than men.
Absolutely. We were actually internally having this discussion at that time and wondering if situation has changed and what would gender bring to a spy, And I think in general, women are always told to take into consideration the other people and what they are thinking and what they need all the time. And I think because of that, women are far more secretive, they're more discreet. And I think all of this also really must have come handy, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Noor Khan became a legendary wire operator.
Yes.
And we ought to note in these days of microchips and, iPhones, wireless communications devices, which were considered to be revolutionary at the time, were about the size of steamer trunks, weren't they?
Yeah. They gave me a real one to carry throughout the shoot. It was really heavy. Yeah. And I'm quite short and I'm quite petite compared to the other actresses in our crew. So there's a joke in the film, actually. She's trying to lift that and she's just saying that, oh my God, this is literally like exercising. Like, how am I ever going to do this and be discreet about it?
Yeah. Well, what made you interested in playing Noor Khan?
I mean, of course I had heard about her, but I hadn't ever done so much research. But the more I read about Nur Inayat Khan, I was absolutely fascinated because, I mean, like most of the people in the world, I've always baffled with war. And people are so driven by anger and revenge and power and loss. And she was somebody driven by hope and peace. The exact opposite. I mean, her struggle, her fight was not led by anger at all, not hatred at all. So it was a very inspiring character.
Yeah. We should explain she's from a pacifist family, Muslim tradition. And at one point she says, what, I'm a pacifist and they're teaching me how to kill.
Yeah. The whole training involves killing and, and combat. And she just can't cope with it. And she said, this is not what I've signed up for. I will save lives, yeah, but I'm not going to kill. And that's when Virginia says, no, actually, this is saving life. This is how you save your own life. But yeah, I think it's such a thin line and such a difficult one to walk that I'm sure that she must have come across so many such questions at every step.
Yeah. And we should explain the three women we're talking about, including, of course, your character, they weren't what we'd call Mataharis. They were soldiers, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had risked their lives, they risked their families, they sacrificed absolutely everything, and they fought in the most dangerous situations, not knowing whether they'll have shelter, whether they'll have food, whether they'll die of cold. I mean, it's literally like they fought like soldiers, absolutely.
I'm struck when one of the characters says towards the end of the film, we are here for only a short time, but what we do changes the course of the future. Yeah.
I think that's what drives her to participate, because she believes that everything is going on, I'm against it. I'm a pacifist, I'm not going to do it. But when you see such massive destruction, there's a purpose why I'm here, and if I just sit at home, do nothing, then I'm of absolutely no relevance. So how I do it, what I do, is going to make a difference. So I will fight in the war, but I'll do it my way, and she does it her way, which is very different from some of the other people who fought in the war. And absolutely, I always believe that there's something we all have to contribute, and instead of getting overwhelmed, we just have to act. Just have to act every day and fight every day. I think that's all we can do.
Radhika Apte, one of the stars of A Call to Spy, that's now in local theaters and on several streaming services. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Idols, sonic powerhouse band from Bristol, England, has built its reputation on songs that are really rallying cries. They roar pro-immigrant anthems, call out white privilege and toxic masculinity, often with a signature humor, as in Never Find a Man with a Perm, off the band's last album. Idols maintain that edgy tone in their new album, Ultra Mono, and the frontman of Idols, Joe Talbot, joins us from Cardiff, Wales. Thanks so much for being with us.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Let's try and get this out of the way first. We've made a list of the way your band's been described. Punk rock, post-punk, hardcore punk, post-hardcore indie punk. And then we saw you quoted in an interview as saying you're not a punk band at all. Journalism, we're pathetically dependent upon labels. What's the label for Idols?
Whatever you want us to be. My comment was really on the idea that if we allow labels as artists, we disallow ourselves the freedom to do whatever we want to do. But as far as conversation around musical art goes, it's not up to the artist to tell the audience what genre they're in. That's just a category thing, so you can find us in the shops. Doesn't matter beyond that.
Let me ask about the power of your sound. Let's listen to a little bit of Nature Shot One. almost like a rivving engine. Tell us about how you come up with that sound.
What we wanted to do, we got a couple of complaints from fans, you know. The biggest show we've ever had to date, which was at Alexandra Palace, we had 10,000 people there, and a couple of people felt unsafe. So I thought we could write an anthem. It's just about encouraging people to respect each other's space in order to make people feel safe at our shows. I'm glad you mentioned engine, though. That's something that we worked on from the very start of the album. The album, I pictured it as an engine, you know, of the self in order to move forward, to kind of plow through self-doubt that comes when you listen to what everyone else thinks about it. So, an engine it is.
Do you think music has a special role these days in the times in which we're living?
Not comparatively, no. I think music's always had a special place, no matter what era. Music is the untold magic of our existence. It's the one thing that we don't understand, but we understand the most. It gives everyone a platform to feel part of the world, but also to feel. And there's something magical about music that is not understandable, but completely humane, which means it's just in us. It will always be a platform to feel, and it will always be a platform on which to be and experience the world.
US and UK are both going through what's often referred to as a cultural awakening, cultural re-examination. Let me ask you about the song Rains.
How does it feel to have blue blood coursing through your veins? How does it feel to have blue blood coursing through your veins?
No need to ask you what you're trying to say in that song. Tell us where it comes from in your heart.
I mean, where do I start? In England and Britain, there's a real cancerous history of class division. And there's a class war going on in this country and in yours. It's the same. The poor are dying at the hands of the 1%, and they're being ignored. And the fact that there's a royal family in our country that exists in a time where people are making charities in order to feed the poor in a developed country is insane. The idea of a royal family is, in my eyes, insane that they still exist.
Let me note for our listeners that you've been through a lot in recent years. Loss of your mother and the loss of your first daughter. I understand you have another daughter now in your life. How are you doing?
I'm alright, thanks, yeah. I'm good. I think in times like this, it's important for people like myself who have a lot to be grateful for to kind of sit back and really take stock of how lucky I am.
I want to ask you about your song, A Hymn.
I guess it was written around a shift in understanding of what I was trying to build in my life through shame. I felt a lot of shame from my past, my addictions and whatnot, and my mistakes. And I wanted to kind of focus on what religion and praise we have now, which is obviously monetary, and I fall into that category. And I just wanted to write a song of the exploration of self-loathing and seeking comfort in distraction rather than embracing myself and enjoying myself for who I truly am, which is what this album is all about. It's about self-acceptance, self-belief and self-care.
I wanna belong. Everybody does. I find shame in the crack like corpse on the diver rain.
You know, there might be people turning pure music now for encouragement, for inspiration. Where do you find yourself inspired? Where do you find yourself uplifted?
Well, that's a beautiful question. The whole album is around finding self-belief by being present and really believing in yourself and accepting who you are in the moment of now. All you will ever have, your whole life, is now. You'll never have the past, and you'll never have the future. I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to find joy at the moment, it's not fighting the situation. It's accepting that it's okay to be depressed, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad. But how all those feelings manifest can change your life forever. And I'm just lucky enough that I found something that I can be angry, violent, depressed, sad, confused, lost, happy, in love, That's the medium. That's what it is. It's an exercise in your feelings and putting it out into the world. And that reflection, when you get it back, it's one of the most beautiful feelings in the world.
Joe Talbot is frontman for Idols, and their new album is Ultra Mono. Thank you so much for being with us.
Absolute pleasure.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from the George Lucas Educational Foundation, creator of Edutopia, an online resource committed to offering inspiration and information about what works in K-12 education. More at edutopia.org. From the Walton Family Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems to improve lives today and benefit future generations. More information at waltonfamilyfoundation.org. And from the listeners who support this NPR station.
You're listening to KSKA Anchorage, also translating as K220AL Girdwood, K201AO Seward, K216BN Prudhoe Bay, K216BG Unalaska, and K261EI Anchorage.
You like to be prepared. That's why you keep a trusty umbrella in your bag. And just like the weather, news can catch us off guard. I'm Camila Dominowski. When you get caught in a rainstorm, you have an umbrella because you're prepared. And when the world gets caught up in sudden breaking news, you have NPR for the facts and context you need. So keep us in your tote bag. Become a sustaining member now.
Become a member at alaskapublic.org or call 550-8484. And thank you.
Support for Alaska Public Media comes from sustaining members and from
Spinell Homes, building homes for Alaskans for more than 30 years. Built by their family, for your family. More at spinellhomes.com.
Trupanion, medical insurance for cats and dogs. Trupanion can help pet owners with coverage for unexpected veterinary costs and will work directly with your veterinarian. More at trupanion.com.
From NPR News in Washington, D.C., this is Weekend Edition. I'm Scott Simon. President Trump's team of doctors said he's in good spirits this morning.
We have monitored his cardiac function, his kidney function, his liver function. All of those are normal. And the president this morning is not on oxygen, not having difficulty breathing or walking around the White House medical unit upstairs.
This week, voters in Wisconsin, which has become a virus hotspot. On the events of this week and how they see the 2020 election, also will catch up on the latest in the 2020 census. And Ireland's Supreme Court tells Subway their bread is closer to dessert. So, what's the problem? First, our newscast. It's Saturday, October 3rd, 2020.
Live Live from NPR News, I'm Barbara Klein. President Trump's doctor says the president is doing very well as a team at Walter Reed Military Medical Center provided an update earlier today on Trump's coronavirus treatment. NPR's Sam Greenglass has details.
White House physician Sean Conley told reporters that President Trump has been without a fever for 24 hours. But he also said Trump is now 72 hours into his diagnosis, raising questions about the timeline of when Trump was actually diagnosed to be positive. That's earlier than the Thursday night tweet when Trump announced he was positive. Another doctor said Trump has been receiving treatment for 48 hours now. Conley said President Trump is not currently on oxygen, but would not say that he had never been on oxygen during the course of the illness. The president was transported to Walter Reed Friday afternoon by helicopter. Sam Greenglass, NPR News, Washington.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is delaying legislative activity until October 19th as the list of Republican senators testing positive for coronavirus continues to grow. But McConnell says committee work on the Amy Coney Barrett Supreme Court nomination will continue. NPR's Sarah McCammon reports.
Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson is the latest to announce a positive coronavirus test. In a statement, Johnson's office says the senator was recently exposed to someone who tested positive and then tested positive himself on Friday. A spokesman says Johnson is not experiencing symptoms and will remain isolated until cleared by a doctor. Two Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Tom Tillis of North Carolina and Mike Lee of Utah, also have recently received positive results. That could complicate efforts by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham to quickly push through Judge Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court confirmation. Sarah McCammon, NPR News.
Johns Hopkins University is reporting more than 7.3 million U.S. coronavirus infections and more than 208,000 deaths. Intense fighting continues between Azerbaijan and Armenia over the long-disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh, an ethnic Armenian territory that's located inside Azerbaijan. The BBC's Jonah Fisher reports from the territory's main town of Stepanakert.
The shelling of Stepanakert continues this morning, and people are leaving. We watched as buses of the most vulnerable were loaded up to go. Then a soldier called out, "Drones overhead," and shortly afterwards there was a loud explosion. The bus accelerated away as the relatives who'd stayed behind ran for cover. At the moment, the Armenian authorities in Nagorno-Karabakh seem to have no answer to the Azeri assault from the air. They say they want talks, but there is no sign that Azerbaijan or its backers, Turkey, feel the same way.
This is NPR. Sudan's power-sharing government and rebel groups formalized a peace agreement today. It's aimed at ending decades of conflict that have left hundreds of thousands dead and millions displaced. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls the Juba Agreement the dawn of a new era for the Sudanese people, and he says the UN is ready to support them. Soldiers in Guatemala have been clashing with some of the thousands of Honduran migrants who rushed the Guatemalan border as they headed north. Maria Martin reports.
A Guatemalan army spokesperson says 2 soldiers were injured Friday. It happened in separate incidents when soldiers intervened after migrants clashed with truck drivers who wouldn't drive them closer to the Mexican border. The Guatemalan government has declared the migrants a health threat during the pandemic, declaring a state of emergency which suspends constitutional rights in provinces the migrants entered. Human rights organizations have documented harsh treatment of the migrants by authorities. In the face of this, several hundred have already decided to head home to Honduras, but many others, via different routes and in small groups, are still trying to head north in search of a better life. For NPR News, I'm Maria Martin.
India is confirming 100,000 coronavirus deaths. That puts its death toll behind only the U.S. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is being sharply criticized for his handling of the outbreak. I'm Barbara Klein, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, offering sponsored jobs, and tools like screener questions to help businesses find the high-impact hires who can make a difference. Learn more at Indeed.com/high-impact.
When it comes to elections, the votes you cast are your voice. That's why public radio reporters are working around the clock to bring you the 2020 news you need so that you can make an informed decision. And that's why you rely on this station. Hi, I'm Susan Davis. November is coming up quick. It's time to listen, and it's time to give. Donate to this station right now. And thanks.
Become a member at alaskapublic.org or call 550-8484. And thanks.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Thank you for being with us. The President of the United States has tested positive for a virus he's openly doubted and minimized at times. Melania Trump has also tested positive, as have a number of close aides and U.S. senators. Today, the President is at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center and is expected to stay there for at least several days. Within the last hour, we got an update on his medical condition from Dr. Sean Connolly, the White House physician. He said the President is doing very well. NPR's Ron Elving joins us. Ron, thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be with you, Scott.
And what else did we learn about the state of the President's health?
As you say, we had a briefing just before midday from Dr. Connolly, the President's personal physician. He said the President was doing very well, was in good spirits, joking that he felt like he could walk right out of here. Dr. Connolly would not give specifics about what, if any, tests may have shown at Walter Reed or getting into the timing of the President's therapies when he started them. He just said that as the President's doctor, he was, quote, extremely happy with the progress being made, unquote. But, Scott, not long after Connolly spoke and cut the questioning short, another person approached the White House pool reporters gathered there before they were taken back to the White House, said they were to be identified only as a person familiar with the President's health, but a person recognizable to the pool reporters. And this individual said the President's last 24 hours had been more worrisome than previously reported, and that the next 48 would be crucial. And we are not yet, quote, not yet on a clear path to a full recovery. So a very different message from what had been said on camera just moments before.
And there seems to be a question about when the President first tested positive, right?
That's right. We were told of that test for the very first time at 1 a.m. on Friday morning, so late Thursday night. But Dr. Connolly said today that the first positive test, or the beginning of the President's diagnosis, as he put it, had been 72 hours ago. That would mean midday Wednesday, and that would mean the President not only went to a fundraiser on Thursday night in New Jersey, knowing he was positive, as had been indicated, but also went to a rally in Minnesota on Wednesday night, knowing he was positive.
Of course, Ron, nobody wants or wishes coronavirus on anyone. President Trump notably certainly didn't want to begin the last month before the election as a patient in Walter Reed, brought down with a disease that he's often diminished.
Well, clearly not. He has been yearning to campaign as he has in the past. He wanted the big events, such as he's had in the past, those well springs of energy for the President's style of politics. And while they cut back on that for months after March and April in deference to the virus, they did try to jumpstart it again in the summer with an abortive event, first of all in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they didn't fill all the seats, and there were a number of people who apparently got the virus. After that, they did hold off for a while and begin again last month with these airplane hangar rallies, where supporters jam into a sort of semi-indoor space with very few people wearing masks or observing social distancing.
And let me take off some of the names of people around the President who've now been diagnosed. Hope Hicks, of course, is campaign manager, Bill Stepien, Kellyanne Conway, 3 journalists who work at the White House, 2 Republican senators, Mike Lee and Tom Tillis, and just within the last half hour or so, Governor Christie, who helped with the debate prep. So given the incubation period, there's still a lot of testing, isn't there?
Oh, that is essential at this point, even beyond the usual battery of testing they've been doing. Now, Vice President Pence is still testing negative, and he is on board to debate with Democratic nominee Kamala Harris on Wednesday night. And also, the Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett has tested negative, as have a number of the other people who attended that ceremony last Saturday.
And Joe Biden, of course, was in that big room in Cleveland, and so far the Bidens have tested negative, right?
That's right. So far they have, and Biden appeared in public yesterday and did travel for an event that was later canceled, but he was wearing a mask throughout the day.
NPR's Ron Elving, thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott.
Since Tuesday's presidential debate in Cleveland, city health officials say that 11 people involved have so far tested positive for the coronavirus. All played a role in planning or setting up the event and were not in the debate hall. During the debate, President Trump, his family, and others were seen not wearing masks, actions that went against the state safety guidelines. As Lisa Ryan of WCPN IdeaStream reports, local health and elected officials criticized this noncompliance.
Although most Ohio residents are required to wear masks in public buildings, State Department of Health spokeswoman Melanie Amato says there wasn't a mandate for the presidential debate.
Political events are exempt. So like his campaign rallies of the mass gathering more than 10 people, it is recommended that they wear masks, but, due to the First Amendment rights, it's something that we're not pushing.
The Cleveland Clinic staff did try to push it. They asked those in attendance to mask up, but some refused, and others put them on before taking them off again. Ohio Democratic House Leader Amelia Sykes was at the debate, and she saw the back and forth.
Right before the event started, there were the Cleveland Clinic doctors who approached folks on the Republican side with masks in hand, offering masks. I did not see anyone accept her offer, but she did spend some time with several people, seemingly trying to convince them to put on a mask and urging them to wear one.
As we now know, President Trump and the First Lady tested positive for coronavirus. Amy Edwards is an infectious disease specialist at University Hospitals in Cleveland. She says conceivably some members of his family and staff could have spread it in Cleveland, even if they tested negative before the debate.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible that he was already incubating the virus when he was here.
But Dr. Edwards says it's hard to say whether the president was contagious then, even if he was already infected. Dr. Edwards says she was disappointed that some in the audience weren't following the state's guidelines, even if it wasn't a mandate.
We have these rules in Ohio because we feel like that's what's best for us, and it seems to be working.
She wasn't the only one who was disappointed over the lack of uniform masking in Cleveland. Cuyahoga County Executive Armin Budish scolded those attendees who chose not to wear a mask.
And I think it was extremely disrespectful for people to come into a place like that and not wear a mask, and I don't think it's real smart.
The Cleveland Clinic, which also serves as health advisor to the Commission on Presidential Debates, released a statement yesterday saying even with the president's positive test, it expects a low risk of exposure for others in the debate hall that night. For NPR News, I'm Lisa Ryan in Cleveland.
Some startling new numbers from the U.S. Labor Department. 865,000 women dropped out of the U.S. workforce last month. That's 4 times the number of men. We have known for months that women are losing more jobs in the pandemic than men. Now we've learned they're quitting their jobs at a much faster clip. NPR's Andrea Hsu joins us now. Andrea, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Scott.
What's going on?
So these are women who may have been laid off, or maybe they quit, or they took a leave of absence. But here's what they have in common. They are not looking for work. So altogether, over 1 million people left the workforce last month, and 80% of them were women. And think about it. This was August to September.
When schools reopen, remotely and in person, yes?
Yeah, we know that almost half of school districts started the year remote. And I talked with Emily Martin. She's with the National Women's Law Center. She says, that left so many families in a bind.
How are they going to make this work? Unfortunately, when families are faced with that question, women dropping out of the workforce it's too often the answer.
And Scott, Emily Martin also highlighted another finding in this labor report that more than 1/3 of the women who dropped out of the workforce last month were Latina. Now, the data don't tell us what jobs they lost, but you can assume that some of them had jobs that couldn't be done from home, or maybe they had jobs that don't exist right now, like service sector jobs. And she says this just points once again to the worsening of inequities in the pandemic.
And Andrea, why are women bearing the brunt of job loss in this difficult time?
Well, sadly, this is nothing new. Study after study finds that women shoulder more of the child care, more of the housework and families. Men are doing more around the house than a generation ago, but the Labor Department has found mothers still spend almost twice as much time on child care and chores. So you add to that virtual school, and women are just saying this is too much. This week I talked with Yuli Lee. She's a lawyer and a mom of 3 kids. She lives in Fairfax County, Virginia. She tried to work from home starting in March when her kids' schools closed, and she did back-to-back work calls until one day she realized that her younger kids weren't eating lunch, and they just didn't know what time it was. And she says that was kind of a wake-up call for her.
I said, you know what? Now I'm not joining every call. I just can't do it. But it was just so many that I had to miss because there were so many things that I had to do for my kids that it just became an untenable situation.
And so she ended up taking a leave of absence, and now she's home with the 3 kids this fall.
What are some of the long-term consequences of women dropping out of the workforce?
Yeah, so a lot of people are concerned about this. Yuli Lee told me that she took off time earlier in her career when she was having her kids, and then when she returned to work, the people she started with were now her supervisors, many levels up. So one consequence is lost wages. Women who take off time from work end up making less money over their careers, and the pandemic could worsen that gender pay gap. But I also spoke to several women this week who study these issues, and they're actually kind of hopeful, because they feel like families now are actually talking about these issues. So many families are struggling to work and take care of kids, and now there's more conversations about things like paid family leave and universal child care. And in the last few years, women had been making strides in the workforce. In January, we learned of this big milestone. More women than men held jobs in the U.S. for the first time in a decade. Of course, the pandemic has erased those gains, Scott, and it's unclear how long it might take for women to come back to work.
NPR's Andrea Hsu, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
You're listening to NPR News.
This is KSKA Anchorage, FM 91.1.
We at Alaska Public Media are grateful for you. You've shown us how important reliable news and information is to you during these challenging times. We read it in your emails, we hear it when you call, and we see that you're listening longer and visiting our website in record numbers. We're committed to serving you and ask for your donation now to support our work. Go to alaskapublic.org or call 550-8484.
Support for Alaska Public Media comes from
Over the Rainbow Toys, where children of all ages can create, explore, and learn with toys and books. Over the Rainbow Toys is in the Huffman Business Park and online at overtherainbowtoys.com.
I'm Barbara Klein with these headlines. Republican Senator Ron Johnson has tested positive for the coronavirus. A spokesman for the chair of the Senate Homeland Security Committee says he's not experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. Intense fighting continues between Azerbaijan and Armenia over the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenia says Azeri forces have bombed the area's capital city. Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher Bob Gibson has died. He played his entire career with the St. Louis Cardinals, leading them to the World Series twice. Gibson was 84. I'm Barbara Klein, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from EBSCO, contributor to the Folio open source project, which is working to develop the open source library services platform of the future. Learn more at folio.org. From Avalara, managing the sales tax compliance process with cloud-based rate and rule updates, as well as automatic return filing. More at avalara.com. Avalara, tax compliance done right. and from listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. President Trump's personal physician, Dr. Sean Connolly, briefed the press earlier today, and we're joined now by NPR science correspondent Joe Palca. Joe, thanks very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Let me ask you about what Dr. Connolly said and what he perhaps didn't say. How did he describe the president's condition?
Well, yes, he and a phalanx, I would say, of support members from his team of physicians came out of a podium in front of the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, and they set a very positive tone. Here's what Dr. Connolly said right at the top.
At this time, the team and I are extremely happy with the progress the president has made. Thursday, he had a mild cough and some nasal congestion and fatigue, all of which are now resolving and improving.
So, that's good news. And the question is, a mild cough and some and mild symptoms sort of made it seem a little strange about why he was taken to the hospital. But as you probably have heard today, he did get given an experimental drug that's supposed to reduce the viral infection that he had. It's a monoclonal antibody cocktail. And he also had this drug remdesivir that they wanted to give him. And perhaps that's the explanation for the hospitalization, because you typically give remdesivir as an intravenous drug, and it's typically given to patients in the hospital.
Joe, you noticed at least a couple of points that seemed to be missing from the briefing, though.
Yeah, there was just strange. I mean, he gave some numbers from the president's health. He gave blood pressure. He gave the high number, the systolic, but not the diastolic. It was just strange. Why wouldn't you say that? And he also said, he was asked repeatedly, he said, the president is not on oxygen. The president is not on oxygen. And people said, well, was he ever in the course of this illness ever on oxygen? And the doctor said, well, he's not on oxygen now. And pretty soon it was clear that there was one gap in the time that the doctor was saying he wasn't on oxygen, which was Friday morning, when apparently he was on oxygen. But why he wouldn't just come out and say something like that was a little confusing. And also the timeline is a little confusing. Let's listen to this clip.
Just 72 hours into the diagnosis now, the first week of COVID, and in particular days 7 to 10, are the most critical in determining the likely course of this illness.
Right, so the key question there is the 72 hours. Okay, so here we are on Saturday afternoon, or this press conference was a couple of hours ago, but Saturday midday, that would make Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, he would be talking about the president being in the course of the illness. But we, the public, didn't hear about the president's having a positive test until Thursday night. So it's just a little bit of confusion here, and the doctor wouldn't also address the question of when the president was negative and when he first tested positive. Clearly he did test positive when the president tweeted that late Thursday night, early Friday morning.
I apparently spoke over some of your words, Joe. My apologies.
That's okay.
And now our dog's barking in the background. After the news conference, reporters were given some other information that was somewhat at odds with what they just heard, right?
Yeah, I think Ron Elving was just talking with you about this, but I'll quote it again because it just had a different flavor. It comes as a quote from the White House pool, quote, comments on background from a source familiar with the president's health. The president's vitals over the last 24 hours were very concerning, and the next 48 hours will be critical in terms of his care. We're still not in a clear path to a full recovery. I think you could say that that's not inconsistent with what Dr. Connolly said. He said that we have, to be very careful at this stage of the disease, but it's a little different tone.
Mm-hmm. And what do we know that's being done for the president now, and any indication as for how long?
Yes, we know he's getting remdesivir. They'll be monitoring all sorts of the signs. They mentioned doing an ultrasound every day, which sounded a little excessive to some doctors. But they'll be watching him closely, and right now they said they're just encouraging to drink fluids and eat food and try to get his health better. And they wouldn't speculate on when he'd come out, but they said they hope it will be within 5 days.
NPR science correspondent Joe Palca, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Of course, Wisconsin is one of the key swing states where presidential candidates are fighting for every single vote. We're taking a closer look at that state as part of a series that focuses on what voters around the country may be thinking. Reporter Maayan Silver of member station WUWM in Milwaukee joins us. Maayan, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Of course, we ought to begin with the latest. President Trump's announcement that he's tested positive for coronavirus. He had 2 rallies planned in Wisconsin, and we should note the state, of course, has become a COVID hotspot. Those rallies have been canceled. What do you hear from his supporters?
Yeah, so even though the president tested positive, supporters I spoke with still stood by his handling of the pandemic. So I went to Waukesha yesterday. It's a Republican stronghold, and I caught some voters. Most said China was to blame, and if the president did downplay anything, it was to prevent panic. But some were concerned about the president. Here's what Alan Seesmeyer, who's a retiree, said.
He should have been wearing a mask, in my opinion. It's nice to say everyone should wear a mask, and I think it's the right thing to do. The trouble is, how do you enforce it?
Seesmeyer mentioned masks. We should note that the Republican lawmakers in the state filed a motion to block the governor's mask mandate here, and over 17,000 people in Wisconsin have become infected in the past week alone, including U.S. Senator Ron Johnson, who just announced this morning that he tested positive for the coronavirus, and some hospitals in the state are actually struggling to cope.
President Trump won Wisconsin in 2016, and that represented a dramatic shift in the way the state had voted for more than 30 years. What do you see there now?
Yeah, the state tipped in Trump's favor in part because Democrats did not turn out voters around the state, including black voters in Milwaukee. It's a strong voting bloc for the party. There's also a pronounced urban-rural divide here, with cities being oases of Democratic voters and the more rural areas trending Republican. But some Republican voters of 2016 might flip this year. So I spoke to Kim Regner, who's a hemp farmer from rural Cedar Grove. She voted for Trump in 2016, but won't this time around.
I think a lot of it is just the demeanor that he gives. He doesn't seem like he is really supportive of a lot of people and certain things. He's morally, I find, kind of repulsive, and I just am very afraid that he's more just for himself.
So Regner said she didn't see Trump as a true Republican, and we should also note that Wisconsin tends to have one of the highest turnout rates in the country, so really it could be neck and neck.
Racial justice protests and counter-protests have become local personal issues there in Wisconsin following the August police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha. How do you think this has affected voters?
So most conservatives I spoke with liked Trump's law and order message, but no one really said it was convincing them to vote for him. They pretty much already liked him. Democrats, though, did say that they were motivated by the rights of black people. So here's Greg Adams Sr. He rode his bicycle to Port Washington's farmers market.
I'm 67, just turned 67 this week, and we're still talking about some of the same issues that I marched for when I was 12 years old. My dad used to take me to marches, and we're still talking about that. But we have a president who's divisive, who talks divisive and sends cues to people.
And what do you hear from rural voters who, in Wisconsin, tend to vote Republican often?
So I went to a farmer's market and a fall festival in rural areas of Wisconsin. On the way, I saw lots of houses and farms with Trump signs and American flags, but it really wasn't COVID or the Supreme Court vacancy that was top of mind for these voters. Some said they support Trump because of the economy, they like his tax cuts and trade war with China. Many were social and cultural conservatives. They were concerned about the Second Amendment and things like that.
And quickly, undecided voters, are there any?
There are a few. Most people were strongly in one camp or the other, but Ashley Hoyne was pretty in the middle on politics and torn who to vote for.
Democrats, I do like their platform on healthcare ideas. Republicans, I'm very pro-life, and that's probably where I kind of lean that way often.
The biggest issues for her are economic, taxes and help for small businesses like hers. She's watching to see how things develop this month.
Mayan Silver, thanks so much for being with us.